Don't have the answer to such a specific question, but I would encourage the member to engage with the minister and the parliamentary secretary to make sure that his concerns are heard, so that perhaps those can be addressed, whether that's through a policy change or whether that's through an amendment in the committee process. That would be the best way to have his concern addressed.
We will have to break now for statements. There will be about a minute and 20 seconds left in the Q&A portion of those exchanges. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are living through a housing crisis. Families are being priced out of their neighborhoods. Young people cannot imagine owning a home, and seniors are being pushed into impossible situations. This crisis is not abstract. It is urgent, it is national, and it is getting worse every single day. When I was in Sudbury this week, I heard directly from local housing experts who told me that there is no shelter spaces, no affordable housing. Children and elderly are increasingly amongst those living on the streets, and the number of unhoused has skyrocketed in the last 2 years with, quote, people are dying faster than we are housing them. This is why I'm calling on the Government of Canada to finally declare a national housing emergency and act on it. That would actually unlock real tools, real coordination, and real funding to deal with the challenge happening in our communities. The future of our communities and of our country depend upon it.
The honourable member for Brampton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House today to recognize the official launch of Celebrate Research Week 2025, a growing national movement that proudly began in Brampton, Ontario. Led by the Osler Research Institute for Health Innovation and supported by local key partners, Celebrate Research Week is transforming how we understand the role of research in our country. Research is a powerful driver of health, equity, economic growth, and community well-being. It lives in the creativity of our students, the insights of our caregivers, the lived experiences of communities, and the bold ideas of educators and entrepreneurs. Throughout this week, events are taking place across Ontario and Canada that elevate the visibility and impact of research in everyday life. Today, I ask all members to join me in congratulating the City of Brampton, the Osler Research Institute for Health Innovation, and all participating institutions and communities across the province for their leadership. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Kamloops Thompson-Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, next Monday, December 1st, will be the second hour of debate on my private member's bill, Bill C-225. This bill addresses the scourge that is intimate partner violence. Thus far, I've been very disappointed on the Liberals' response to such a bill that is needed right here, right now. In attendance, I anticipate and hope will be some of Bailey McCourt's family who asked that this bill be called Bailey's Law. Debbie Henderson, for instance, Bailey's aunt, has been fighting non-stop to get the Justice Minister and this government to move on the issue. Not a day has gone by without her advocacy. I would like to thank the McCourt family for the honor in asking for this to be named Bailey's Bill. Let us not forget the other victim that was with Bailey, Carrie Weeb, Bailey's mother, Karen. There is not one member in this House who should be voting against it. The Liberals need to vote for this bill on December 3rd. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton-Canso, Antigonish.
Mr. Speaker, we have liftoff in Cape Breton-Canso, Antigonish. Last week, in my riding, Maritime Launch Services conducted a suborbital space launch in Nova Scotia. This gravitational leap for our province and for Spaceport Nova Scotia brings us one step closer to achieving Canadian sovereign launch capability. In our near future, it's expected that we'll witness an orbital launch on the soil of Cape Breton-Canso, Antigonish. This process will be groundbreaking for our local economy, for our national sovereignty and security, and for the future of commercial space industry in Canada. Our region is growing, expanding, and building. Nova Scotia is headed into new stratospheres. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to celebrate this achievement of the suborbital launch, and I look forward to supporting them on their journey to space, often called the final frontier. I look forward to Canada's future, and as one famous Canadian once put it, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
The honourable member for Grand Prairie.
Well, last Friday night, the sirens sounded as fire and first responders raced to the iconic Grand Prairie Farmers Market in the heart of our city. Thankfully, the market was closed for the day and no one was injured, but the flames rendered the building unusable. This tragedy has come at the worst time that it possibly can. In the lead up to Christmas, locals depend on the market for baking, gifts, and other holiday goodies, and the makers, bakers, growers, and crafters who sell their products depend on the Christmas sales to carry them throughout the rest of the year. Our community will come together because that's what we do, and I'm sure in time the building will be rebuilt. But in the meantime, our community will travel a little bit further to Evergreen Park to support those vendors who desperately need our support. We thank the city and county firefighters, including members who were off duty, who raced to the scene of the fire to put out the flames. Thank you to the market staff and the vendors for your resilience, and thank you to our community who will step up and support our Grand Prairie Farmers Market as they seek to serve us as they always have.
The honourable member for Thérèse de Blainville. Mr. Speaker, Canada and Quebec have lost a visionary and a pioneer. The late René Dallaire was a man of courage, energy and optimism. An elite skier at the age of 19, he became quadriplegic after a brutal fall. Driven by extraordinary perseverance, he went on to earn his MBA, worked for 20 years as a finance director, and in addition became the first Quebecer to use a head-controlled wheelchair. He was also active in several organizations working to defend the rights of people with physical limitations. Then, in 1994, he founded the Quebec Adaptive Sailing Association and created the Quebec Cup Regatta, which brings together sailors with physical disabilities. René Dallaire inspired us to push our limits, whatever they may be. We offer our sincere condolences to his family and to all those who had the great privilege of knowing him. Thank you.
The honourable member for Wellington Halton Hills North.
Mr. Speaker, it's a privilege to represent Wellington Halton Hills North. The Canadians who live in the riding, in Wellington County, in the town of Halton Hills, and the city of Guelph are truly exceptional. In the last 7 years, 3 people from Guelph and Wellington County have received the Nobel Prize. Donna Strickland received a joint Nobel Prize in physics. David Card and Peter Howitt separately received joint Nobel Prizes in economics. This global excellence is extraordinary, coming from Guelph and Wellington County, a community of merely only some 200,000 Canadians. What was it about the Guelph and Wellington County of the 1960s and 70s when these extraordinary Canadians came of age that produced such global excellence? Whatever it was, Canada needs more of it. Congratulations to all 3 of these extraordinary Canadians.
The honourable member for Fleetwood Port Kells.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House today to speak about our charter that was 43 years ago. Canadians have had confidence that their federal government will respect their charter guaranteed rights. The leader of the opposition has now admitted that he would be the first man to breach that trust. He would walk over on charter rights. He is telling us exactly who he is. By contrast, our government remains committed to protecting these rights and freedom because Canadians expect all orders of government to abide by the charter, not limited. Mr. Speaker, we are the party of charter and we will always do our job. The job is to consistently defend the charter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Bow River.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government's gun confiscation scheme has been a failure from the start. Their Cape Breton pilot reportedly collected just 22 guns, yet the government continues to hold the official results. Likely because this dismal result is true. Now they want to roll this broken program out nationally, including in southern Alberta. To make things even worse, the police chief overseeing the pilot, the brother-in-law of a Liberal MP, has suddenly announced his retirement just as scrutiny intensifies. Meanwhile, the other member from Cape Breton shrugged off the failures, claiming, "I haven't heard anything. People aren't talking about it." Well, Mr. Speaker, maybe that member should pay more attention to the concerns of his residents instead of breaking the Elections Act. Every minister admitted in leaked audio, even the minister admitted in leaked audio that the program didn't work. This wasteful $750 million Liberal vanity project won't stop violent crime. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals should scrap this program.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Mr. Speaker, on the 16th of November 1885, the founder of Manitoba, a métis from Red River, and a brother from Quebec, Louis Riel, was hanged. Quebecers, unlike English Canadians, have always considered him a hero who stood up for the French language and for his people. Like the Patriots of Quebec, he suffered the same fate that Canada reserved for those who opposed its power, the gallows. Quebecers flooded the Champ de Mars in Montreal to express their discontent. This mobilization was a testament to the deep ties that united the Métis and Quebec. We have never forgotten Louis Riel. He is still in our history books, a heroic figure of a larger-than-life movement. Nor have we forgotten what Canada and its Prime Minister at the time did. Yes, the Quebec dogs barked. I am one of them, and I will continue to bark for so long as justice isn't rendered for Louis Riel and for the Métis of Rivière-Rouge, and that goes through quick recognition.
The Honourable Member for King's Hands.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute and to recognize the contribution of 4-H Canada in our communities across this beautiful country, including in my communities of King's Hands. This past weekend, Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to join the Hants County 4-H for their celebration of achievement of members all across the county. And let me say, what a tremendous representation of a program that is community-led, that gives our youth the skills that, of course, support agriculture, but skills that serve in a whole host of capacities for their future career. I specifically want to recognize a number of individuals, Mr. Speaker, that competed at the Royal Agricultural Winter Fair. This is a prominent event in the country. Henry Smethurst was the Canadian champion in Ayrshire on dairy. Brianna Partridge, reserve champion in dairy on Ayrshire. And also to Emma Kroll and Evan Collins, who represented Team Nova Scotia in the beef competition. Mr. Speaker, that's an example of King's Hands competing on the national stage. Congratulations to all 4-H members. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Souris, Moose Mountain.
Canadians are a nation that feeds the world, yet more and more families can't afford to feed themselves. That contradiction should trouble every person in this chamber, because food inflation isn't an accident of global forces. It's the direct result of decisions made by this Liberal government. Under the Liberals, food prices have risen nearly 40% faster in Canada than they have in the United States. In just 1 year, beef has risen 16%, carrots 11%, coffee a staggering 34%. Even baby formula has risen 6%. At the very moment that Canadians needed relief, the Liberals chose to hike the industrial carbon tax, increasing the cost of food, fertilizer, fuel, and transportation and farm equipment. The result? Higher bills at the checkout and rising anxiety at the kitchen table. The most expensive government in Canadian history has delivered the most expensive groceries in Canadian histories. Canadians are demanding a government that makes life more affordable, and only Conservatives will deliver.
The Honourable Member for Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, today on International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, our government is clear. Violence against women must end. Too many women still live in fear. Too many children grow up in homes marked by abuse, and this is unacceptable. In Port Moody and Coquitlam, I thank Tri-City Transitions, the Soar Optimist warm place for women, and Share Family and Community Services. They are lifelines. They offer shelter, they offer support, and they offer hope. To the women who bravely step forward and to those who walk beside them, we honor your courage. Our government is investing $224 million over 5 years to prevent gender-based violence and expand survivor supports. We will not stop until every woman can live free from violence.
The Honourable Member for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, hard-working Canadians are struggling, lining up at food banks and paying eye-wateringly high Liberal taxes. You know who isn't struggling, Mr. Speaker? The Prime Minister, his corporate elite buddies, and Brookfield. As Canada's #1 tax dodger, Brookfield avoided paying $6.5 billion in taxes. That's enough to buy a week's worth of groceries for every single Canadian, Mr. Speaker. In case Brookfield's tax dodging wasn't enough, now this Prime Minister is handing them Canadian taxpayers' hard-earned money. We learned that the European Space Agency received a $500 million contract. What was hidden was that 50% of the Harwell campus, where the European Space Agency is located, is owned by, you guessed it, Brookfield. Mr. Speaker, this out-of-touch Prime Minister's record is to ship jobs out of the country and chase away investment. Canadians deserve a Prime Minister who puts Canada and Canadians first, not his corporate buddies.
The honourable member for Humber River Black Creek.
Mr. Speaker, as chair of the Canada-Taiwan Friendship Group, I'm honoured today to rise and welcome to the Hill the President of the Taiwanese Chambers of Commerce of North America. Delegates have come from across the continent in the spirit of new opportunities and stronger trade. This week I have the privilege of hosting two important events, a parliamentary discussion on Canada-Taiwan relations and the vibrant celebration of Taiwan Night 2025 celebrating the strong and growing ties between Canada and Taiwan rooted in shared democracy, values, mutual respect, and a commitment to economic cooperation. Like Canada, Taiwan is a dynamic and innovative partner. By expanding trade, investment, and cultural exchange, we strengthen supply chains, foster prosperity, and build bridges that transcend borders and oceans. I thank our guests for this dedication and look forward to seeing everyone tonight at Taiwan 2025.
The honourable member for Kildonan St. Paul.
The Prime Minister positioned himself as the so-called man with a plan to save Canada from Mr. Trump. He promised he would deliver a trade deal by July 21st, but he failed to deliver on that promise. And now, as a result, Canada is losing thousands of manufacturing jobs. Breaking his promise has real consequences. Businesses are packing up and leaving Canada for greener pastures in the U.S., where there's tariff relief, lower taxes, and less regulation. And now the Prime Minister is treating this issue as it's irrelevant. Who cares, he said, about the negotiations breaking down? And then he doesn't, quote, have a burning issue to speak with the President about right now, end quote. It is outrageous, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister of this country would even say that thousands of jobs in steel, autos, forestry, and countless other industries are bleeding, and Canada is on the precipice of losing tens of thousands of good-paying Canadian jobs. So who cares, Mr. Speaker? Well, Conservatives care. And we are the only ones that will deliver a Canada to make it the best place to build, to hire Canadian workers. Only Conservatives will deliver on that promise.
The honourable member for Spadina Harbourfront.
Mr. Speaker, last month, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce's Business Data Lab, commissioned by Business Arts in partnership with the Canada Council for the Arts, released a report confirming that the arts are far more than cultural expression. They're a key economic driver. In 2024, the sector generated $65 billion in GDP, nearly $130 billion in total economic impact, and over $7 billion in tax revenue that helps support essential public services. We often talk about physical infrastructure, but cultural infrastructure, like the arts, is what connects us as a country. This is where identity takes shape and where Canadians are themselves reflected. Our government recognizes this, which is why Budget 2025 makes important investments in arts and culture and helping Canadian creators share their stories at home and around the world. This evening, I invite all members to attend the Canada Live Performance Arts Industry's reception with industry leaders, artists, and a very special performance by iconic Canadian musician Alan Doyle. Thank you.
Oral questions, questions orales. The honourable leader of the opposition.
Mr. Speaker, in his 28 trips, this Prime Minister hasn't been able to reduce a single foreign tariff on Canada. But he has managed to find gains for Brookfield. A few days after he met with President Trump, the President signed an agreement to buy $80 billion worth of nuclear products from Brookfield. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is spending millions of dollars for a special project in Europe on the Brookfield campus. Why is it that every time the Prime Minister goes abroad, Canadians get poorer, but Brookfield, his business, gets richer? The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
services. Monsieur le Président, comme d'habitude.
Mr. Speaker, as usual, the leader of the opposition should check his numbers. The government of Indonesia has reduced tariffs on Canadian goods on 95% of our goods and services. Meanwhile, the government of the UAE will invest $70 billion in our economy.
No, not the right honourable. The leader of the opposition. The honourable leader of the opposition.
Since the Prime Minister was elected promising, quote, to negotiate a win with the U.S., American tariffs on autos, aluminum, and steel have doubled, and on Canadian lumber, they've tripled. Not a single American tariff has been reduced since he promised he would reduce them. And now he says, who cares?
Yep.
Mr. Speaker, I care about the 3,000 auto workers that I met on the picket line in Brampton who are out of a job. I care about the 8 mills that have closed because the Prime Minister failed to deliver a deal. The workers on those lines, they care. Canadians care. Why doesn't the Prime Minister care?
Hear, hear. The right honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, since I became Prime Minister, Canada has secured the lowest tariffs of any country in the world. On 85% of our goods, the tariffs are zero. Yes, Mr. Speaker, there are sectors, the auto sector, the steel sector, the lumber sector, the aluminum sector, that are under pressure. We care. We're acting in those sectors. There will be announcements this week to further support.
The honourable leader of the opposition.
Before the election, he promised elbows up. After, it was who cares?
Yeah.
Before the election, he said the tariffs were an existential crisis. Now he says they're not a burning issue. Before the election, he promised to negotiate a win. After, he backed down to American tariffs, and those tariffs have now doubled on Canadian aluminum, autos, and steel, and tripled on Canadian lumber. Before the election, he promised the fastest growing economy in the G7. After, he delivered the fastest shrinking economy. Why is the Prime Minister before the election so much different than the one after?
Yeah. The right honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on the night of the election, when I had the great honour from my constituents of being elected as a deputy of this House, unlike some others in the chamber today, I made a promise to Canadians. When I make a mistake, I'll admit it. That was a poor choice of words about a serious issue. And the serious issue is what progress are we making structurally? Best deal in the world, strongest budget in the world, and the most new trade deals in the world.
The honourable leader of the opposition.
The Prime Minister did make a mistake. He's made many mistakes. In fact, it's been nothing but mistakes when it's come to trade. Look at it. This Prime Minister promised that he would negotiate a win on softwood lumber. Now he says, who cares? Well, Conservatives care. Within 80 days of the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, taking office, he managed to eliminate American tariffs on softwood lumber and get refunds of them. This Prime Minister has now had 8 months, and those tariffs have now more than tripled. Prime Minister asks, who cares? I can tell you, on behalf of all the MPs on this side, we care about the jobs that are being lost in Lumbertown. Why doesn't he?
The right honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government cares about creating jobs in this country. That's why we proposed a budget before this House that catalyzes $1 trillion of investment over 5 years. The member opposite and his colleagues, those who could make it into the room, voted against that budget, voted against Canadian workers, voted against Canada's future. We believe in this country, Mr. Speaker, and we are building it.
Hear, hear. The honourable leader of the opposition.
Well, Chinese, American, Indian, and other tariffs have only gone up since the Prime Minister began his 28-trip journey around the world. He hasn't had a single solitary win. In fact, the only wins he's had are for Brookfield. Just days after he met with the President, Trump signed on to $80 billion of nuclear purchases from Brookfield. And then he gave $500 million of our tax money to the European Space Agency located on Brookfield's campus. Why is it that whenever he spends his time and our money, Canadians end up poor and he and Brookfield end up richer?
The right honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, not for the first time, the Leader of the Opposition needs to check his numbers. The government of Indonesia is reducing tariffs on 95% of Canadian goods. Canada has the best deal with the United States. 85% of our goods are tariff-free. The United Arab Emirates is just confirmed that they want to invest $70 billion in this country. They believe in Canada's future. Why don't the members up?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Right, and he arrived just a few days after Brookfield's CEO, lining up with the same interests that are not Canadian interests, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of Canadian interests, this Prime Minister opposed the pipeline from Alberta to the Pacific, just like his Liberal predecessor blocked that same pipeline. On Thursday, he'll make one of his grand announcements waving around a meaningless so-called Memorandum of Understanding. If it's anything other than a public relations ploy, why won't he say on what date will construction begin on a pipeline from Alberta to the Pacific?
Hear, hear. The right honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, sometimes the question reveals everything. The Memorandum of Understanding that we're negotiating with Alberta creates necessary conditions but not sufficient conditions because we believe in cooperative federalism. We believe the government of British Columbia has to agree. We believe that First Nations right holders in this country have to agree and support. All stakeholders have to back. That's one Canada.
L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals always cheat. We're just going to wait for things to calm down so that we can hear the Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Please go ahead. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals always cheat. We found that out in 1995, and we see it now. The Minister of Immigration at the time confirmed that Jean Chrétien asked him to speed up giving citizenship to as many people as possible so they could vote in the referendum, and the Liberals have admitted that they leveraged immigration during that vote. Last month, Jean Chrétien also admitted that if Quebecers had voted yes, he would have used a whole bunch of low tricks to avoid having to recognize the new reality. Liberals always cheat, and if Quebec holds a new referendum, will they cheat again? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Yes, Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, I would say that with 45 Quebec Liberal members here, it's pretty clear that we respect the vote of Quebecers. The Bloc Québécois is always criticizing Quebec members, and meanwhile we are building this great country. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, I repeat, the Liberals cheated during the referendum, whereas the yes camp was democratic. The proof of that is how Quebecers nobly accepted the results of the referendum, but they accepted it because they felt that it was a democratic process, but actually that democratic process had been undermined by the Liberals. They rigged the results, and Jean Chrétien was even prepared to cheat if the yes camp had won. With a third referendum on the horizon, will the Federalists finally debate democratically instead of using cheating and scary stories? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois is turned toward the past, but this government is turned toward the future. With confidence, boldness, and ambition for Quebec and Canada.
L'honorable député du Lac-Saint-Jean.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, a lot of people have to wait for years to be granted citizenship. while Ottawa twiddles its thumbs. But now we know what the Liberals are up to. We know that if there were just a referendum in Quebec, Ottawa would suddenly take action. Imagine the conversation. Oh, you want us to process your file more quickly? Okay, great. But you will vote against the referendum to thank the good old Canadian government. How is it that Canada's immigration system is always broken except when there's an opportunity to harm Quebec? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, once again, the Bloc Québécois is trying to scare us. Canada attracts the best people in the world. And all Canadians and Quebecers want to build this great country with our government.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister apparently hasn't read our Constitution, which indicates that the federal government alone has jurisdiction over pipelines that cross borders. Let me quote 9210. Federal jurisdiction applies to works and undertakings that connect one province to another or extend beyond provincial limits. In other words, it is exclusively the federal government's decision on whether to approve a pipeline. It was this federal government that blocked the last pipeline. So can he confirm, once and for all, is he deciding unilaterally to give veto to NDP BC Premier to block a project that Canada needs?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, last week we talked about that big, long, giant pipeline of hot air that animated the country for 10 years during the government of which that member was a member. Not a single milliliter of oil reached Tidewater under the Harper era. In a Liberal government, oil exports have increased. Oil exports to Tidewater, thanks to the purchase of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, have increased. Canada is a conventional and a renewable energy superpower, and that will continue.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it really is embarrassing that a Prime Minister who claimed that he was the man with the plan cannot even stand up and debate me about pipelines on the floor of the House of Commons. He's afraid. The previous Conservative government approved a pipeline to Tidewaters, the Northern Gateway Pipeline, which the Liberals then defeated and destroyed, giving massive power to the Americans to monopolize our oil. Will the Prime Minister, who promised to act with unimaginable speed 8 months ago, finally stand up for Canadian workers and confirm that he will approve a pipe to the top? The
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, our government fully understands the ultimate jurisdiction for interprovincial pipelines rests with the federal government. At the same time, our government has been clear that a proponent for a major project, for it to be designated, we expect it to work with the impacted jurisdictions and with First Nations. Mr. Speaker, they don't understand that. The Premier of Alberta understands that. They want to work with us.
Great job, Jeff. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it really is pathetic that the Prime Minister cannot stand in his place and defend his position. He's afraid to defend the fact that on Thursday, he will not sign on to a new pipeline. He will sign on to a public relations stunt while planning to hide behind the Premier of BC and abdicating his unique constitutional responsibilities. If he wanted a pipeline, if he no longer believed in the keep it in the ground extremist ideology that he supported for 10 years, then he would stand up today and say that he will approve a pipe to the Pacific. Will he?
The Honourable Minister of Excuse me, we haven't given the green light yet to answer the question. I'm waiting for it to get a little quieter.
You don't control this speaker's
Yeah, like the Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition doesn't seem to understand how to get a pipeline built. The Premier of Alberta does. It's working with this government to build Canada strong, Mr. Speaker.
Of of the Opposition.
Speaker, the question was for the Prime Minister. He's here in Ottawa today. He has the ability to stand up and state his position. He claimed that he was going to act with unimaginable speed. Here we are 8 months later, and he refuses to state whether he even supports a new oil pipeline or whether he'd like to continue to pump that oil at discounts to the United States of America while Canadians pay the price. What does it take to get a pipeline approved by this Prime Minister? Does it have to be a Brookfield pipeline?
The honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, natural resources projects, interprovincial resource projects, there are indeed a great deal of those. The federal government has a unique role and must ensure that our obligations to First Nations, our obligations to other provinces, to communities, to consulting are present and those conditions are met, and then we are able to proceed. The Leader of the Opposition, now that he's standing right there, may want to stand up and say what part of that process would he not respect, Mr. Speaker?
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I don't respect the idea of standing in the way of Canadian energy workers and giving our oil to the Americans at a discount. What we would do is get the government out of the way and get the project built. The Prime Minister has the unique constitutional opportunity to do that. Section 9210 of the BNA Act makes it exclusively a federal decision. This Prime Minister is hiding under his desk rather than answering the question. 8 months after promising that he would take unprecedented action with unimaginable speed, he's done nothing. Why doesn't he get out of the way?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Nonsense. We have dozens of major projects in play and under study, and we are building the country at unimaginable speed. We are creating opportunities for energy workers, for young people, for housing, for steel, lumber, aluminum, and autos in this country. That is what we are doing. What is shocking is that the Leader of the Opposition stands in his place and somehow pretends in his whole fake way that he's going to override and steamroll the rights of Canadians that have a right to have a say in these projects. We're going to give them a say. He won't.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
While the Prime Minister hides under his desk, he puts up his House Leader to rant and rave and pump his fists in the air. This Prime Minister said that we faced an existential crisis requiring that we act with unimaginable speed. And here we are 8 months later, and he doesn't even have the courage to tell Canadians whether he supports a pipeline that would allow us to go around the American monopoly of our energy and get our product to the world. So will he finally stand up for workers, stand up in this House, and answer the question, a pipeline or a pipe dream?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of ranting and raving, I asked the Leader of the Opposition yesterday. Two significant things were said by members of his caucus last week. Number one, the member for Calgary Midnapore suggested the Prime Minister was disloyal to Canada. Secondly, the member for Northern Rockies repeated MAGA claims that immigrants were the cause of economic slowdown in Canada. He should stand in his place right now and apologize for those comments. Take those members to task and do something for
I can't imagine what we have in store for Wednesday. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's not us the question, the loyalty of the Prime Minister. He's the one that is blocking a pipeline that would allow Canada to become energy independent, to reach markets outside of Canada, while he and his company invest in pipelines in the Middle East. and in Latin America. He's the one that forces Canadians to spend more on taxes than on food, clothing, and shelter combined, while he stashes his cash in a Bermuda tax haven above a bicycle shop. So if he wants to say that he's Canada first, why doesn't he stand up in this House and start acting like it?
Honourable Minister of Jobs and Family.
The Building Trades Union, the Canadian Labour Congress.
He's too busy checking his shares and stuff as they've gone up.
Does the honourable member have a question?
Yeah, the best.
The honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Mr. Speaker, the Building Trades Union, the Canadian Labour Congress, the Leona Union, Mr. Speaker. These are all unions that have praised Budget 2025. And you know why, Mr. Speaker? Because they make historic investments in the major infrastructure projects that are going to create great jobs all across this country. Whether it's supporting Canadians through things like the Canada Child Benefit, indexing it to inflation, whether it's creating jobs and helping people get the skills to take them. Mr. Speaker, these Conservatives vote against Canadians every single time. Canadians know better.
L'honorable député de...
The honourable member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, it's official. Canada is giving up on fighting climate change. The Prime Minister will announce it Thursday with a whole new dirty pipeline to the West Coast. Another one after Trans Mountain, which cost people $34 billion. And that's not even counting climate adaptation costs. A new pipeline, which thanks to C5 and C15, I will have to interrupt the member.
Un instant.
Although the member is a bit far away from me, I have a speaker here, and yet even with the speaker, I couldn't hear him. I would like to ask the member for Repentigny to start over from the beginning. Mr. Speaker, I think the Prime Minister doesn't want to hear this question, but it's official. Canada has given up on the fight against climate change. We'll see that Thursday when a new dirty pipeline will be announced, another one. We already have Trans Mountain, which costs Canadian citizens $34 billion, and that's not counting climate adaptation costs. This is a dark day. Dark, just like the dirty oil that the Liberals are wallowing in. This government clearly has no green convictions left. The Honourable Minister for Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, as I've said before, our government is committed to fighting climate change every day. If my colleague wants to talk about major projects, well, I would like to talk about the Iqaluit hydroelectric project, which will enable northern communities to have clean energy. That's important both for people's health and for the environment. Or what about high-speed rail, which is good for our communities? We are doing the work, and we are fighting climate change every day. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, on May 14th, the Minister of Heritage stated that this is not the right time for new pipelines. But clearly for his party, it's always a good time. Because now, in addition to Trans Mountain, we have a second dirty pipeline to the West Coast. We remember the years of Stephen Harper as being bad years for the environment. But Stephen Harper never approved a single pipeline, whereas these Liberals will have approved 2 new pipelines. And that includes the Minister of Heritage. How is he still part of that party? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, it is quite remarkable to hear members of the Bloc Québécois today when we have created a generational budget which invests in infrastructure, in national corridors, which will enable us to create clean energy projects throughout the country, Mr. Speaker. If I were in the Bloc Québécois, I would be standing up to applaud Budget 2025. But instead, they hid away on the day of the budget. They will have to explain to Quebecers why they are voting against green projects throughout the country. On this side of the House, we will always be there to build Canada strong. The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, just like 30 years ago, the Liberals want to hand out citizenship to just about anyone. In Bill C-12, the Liberals are giving themselves the authority to change temporary resident visa to create permanent visas. They've stated that they could cancel or vary permanent or temporary resident visas, work and study permits, electronic travel authorizations, and other documents. Liberals want to speed up the process to access citizenship. Are they doing that in the interest of Canada or of the Liberal Party? The Honourable Minister of Citizenship, Refugees and Immigration. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This government is focusing on the future. We will reduce temporary residences. We will prioritize economic immigration, and we will also grow Francophone communities. I hope that the Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives will support us in that. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, I hope that the Minister will read her own bill so that she understands what she's doing. Mr. Speaker, at the G20 summit recently, when this Prime Minister was asked whether he would be speaking to the American President, he said, "Who cares?" which in French is, "Who cares?" And now we understand that that's because, well, this morning, Brookfield's chief operating officer stated at a committee that 95% of Brookfield's the big businesses that Brookfield holds, are not going to be under the ethics review, which means that the Prime Minister will personally benefit from at least 1,900 businesses. And now we know why he doesn't care about these 3,800 employees in the aluminum sector. The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, these Conservatives keep repeating these empty, completely hollow allegations without a shred of truth to them. It's shocking to hear from my veteran colleague. As he knows perfectly well, we have one of the strictest ethics codes in the entire world, which the Prime Minister is following to the letter.
The Honourable Member for York-Durham.
The Prime Minister was elected on a promise to negotiate a win, a good deal with the United States. But when asked about it on the weekend, he said, "Who cares? It's just a detail," and that he would speak with the President when it matters. From negotiate a win to who cares in a matter of months. Who cares about our most important trading relationship? Canadians care. Ontario's auto industry is more than just a detail. It matters to the thousands of workers in York and Durham regions, and it matters now. Well, the Prime Minister explained to Ontario's auto workers why he said, "Who cares?"
The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-US trade.
Mr. Speaker, as we said yesterday, just because our colleague keeps repeating the same inaccurate phrase doesn't make it real. The Prime Minister has said that our government will always stand up for workers in the auto sector, in the steel sector, in the aluminum sector, in the forestry sector. Unlike the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, our government isn't going to sign just any old deal. We're going to sign a deal that's in the interest of Canadian workers and the Canadian economy, and we're going to continue to support those sectors as we go through these difficult times.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Kenora-Kiiwetinoong.
The Prime Minister proclaimed himself the so-called master negotiator when it came to dealing with the Americans, Mr. Speaker. He promised to negotiate a win by July 21st. Now, months after failing to do so, he says, "Who cares?" Well, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you who cares. Conservatives care, and the workers, the sawmill workers in Ear Falls, hundreds of which who have lost their jobs, they care, Mr. Speaker. So will the Prime Minister look at those workers and tell them, who cares?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, we care about the forestry industry. That's why we've announced $1.2 billion in support for the industry. That's why we're meeting almost every day with the industries, as recently as last night, Mr. Speaker. And we have good news for the opposition. There will be new supports coming this week for the forestry product sector.
The Honourable Member for Regina Wascana.
Mr. Speaker, during the election campaign, this Prime Minister said he would be elbows up when dealing with the existential crisis of Trump's tariffs. Now, months after failing to negotiate a win, he's saying, who cares? Well, I'll tell you who cares. Conservatives care, and so do the 1,200 steel workers at Interpro Pipe and Steel in Regina, whose jobs are under threat because of this trade war. How can the Prime Minister look the 1,200 steel workers at Interpro Pipe and Steel in the eyes and tell them who cares?
The Honourable Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, our colleagues keep repeating phrases that they know are not accurate. What is accurate, Mr. Speaker, is our government has always supported the hardworking women and men who work in our steel sector in every corner of the country. We've put in place unprecedented support measures. We're prepared to continue to do more. The Prime Minister met with industry leaders in this sector last week. Mr. Speaker, we'll always stand up for the hardworking women and men in our steel sector and other sectors of the Canadian economy.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Milton East, Halton Hills South.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians want to see real results, new jobs, new opportunities, and growth that supports families and businesses in communities like mine in Milton and Georgetown. This past week, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs were in the UAE and South Africa, making deals, securing those opportunities, and showcasing the best of what Canada has to offer. Could the Minister of Foreign Affairs update the House on how Canada is leveraging our strengths to deliver real benefits to Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for her question. Everywhere I go, people say they want more Canada. And last week, the Prime Minister confirmed the largest foreign investment commitment in Canadian history at $70 billion. Speaker, in addition, we have launched trade negotiations with India for a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, Mr. Speaker. We are building the strongest economy in the G7 by unlocking generational investments. Vive la Canada!
The Honourable Member for Foothills.
3 years ago, the Finance Minister promised Canadians he would stabilize food prices by Thanksgiving. Well, 3 pumpkin pies have come and gone, and food inflation is 50% higher than target. What could possibly have gone wrong when the Finance Minister promised tools like the Grocery Code of Conduct would lower grocery prices? Well, every single expert at the Agriculture Committee, including the President of the Grocery Code, said it was never designed to lower food prices. So will the Minister of Finance please stand and explain to Canadians why he promised the code would lower food prices when he knew it would do no such thing?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Family.
Let's talk about something other than imaginary taxes, shall we? While the Conservatives hammer away on taxes that aren't real, we are actually helping Canadians with the cost of living. Every year, Mr. Speaker, for example, the Canada Child Benefit Old Age Security is indexed to inflation. And what happens every year, Mr. Speaker? Every year, these Conservatives vote against those increases that actually help Canadians keep up with the price of living. Finally, Mr. Speaker, let me just quote the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois. He said, every year when we write Canada's food price report, climate change is the #1 wild card factor.
The Honourable Member for Foothills.
Well, the fact is, Mr. Speaker, food prices are rising because this Liberal government is the most expensive in Canadian history. And every time the Prime Minister sticks his hand in the pockets of Canadians, he drives up the price of everything. And we are seeing with their own imaginary taxes like the fuel tax and an increase to the industrial carbon tax are making everything more expensive, driving up the cost to grow the food, move the food, and buy the food. This is at a time when food inflation in Canada is 40% higher than it is in the United States. Why is the Prime Minister so intent to force Canadians to food banks by increasing his taxes on food and fuel?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, if that leader, that member, and that party actually cared about making life more affordable for Canadians, they wouldn't have voted against automatic federal benefits, getting 5.5 million Canadians benefits that otherwise would be left unclaimed. Benefits like the Canada Child Benefit, the Disability Tax Credit, the Canada Workers Benefit. The only thing that leader cares about is keeping his job, his dismal poll numbers, and quashing a caucus revolt. We care about Canadians, and we will deliver for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lethbridge.
Well, it's clear that families across the country are struggling to afford even the most basic necessities. Under this Liberal government, many Canadians have been stripped of the basic dignity of being able to provide for themselves. Since 2017, for example, the price of baby formula has gone up by 84%, leaving parents so desperate that it's actually now the #1 item taken from grocery store shelves. Yesterday, the Secretary of State for Children and Youth said or suggested that hungry infants should in fact enroll in the Liberal school food program. Wow. So I'm just curious, do Liberals understand that babies don't go to school?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Mr. Speaker, we all want the best solution to drive down the price of food, and that's why we're working on real facts. My colleague mentioned the Agriculture Committee. Well, let me quote you the VP of Costco and other grocers, but he said, and I quote, "What drives the price of food? The first item is the commodity itself. With a bad crop, the price goes up. With a good crop, the price goes down. It has nothing to do with any policy, Mr. Speaker. We want solution. In order to drive down the price of food, we have to support our farmer with climate resilience, Mr. Speaker."
The honourable member for Lethbridge.
So I guess the answer is yes, then. Liberals believe that babies should just go and enroll in a school food program that they offer. It's ludicrous that Liberals are referring hungry babies to a school food program. It's outrageous that in a country like Canada, parents are having to make the decision between paying their bills and being able to afford the basic necessities of life for a baby. This is literally life and death, and these Liberals stand over there and shrug their shoulders. When will the Prime Minister stop his inflationary spending and make life affordable for Canadians again?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Children and Youth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we understand that any parent struggling to feed their child is one parent too many. My colleague opposite knows that Canada has historically relied on imports of baby formula, which means Canadians have been impacted by external pressures. As a country, we do have to move from reliance to resilience, and I would also point out that the Canada Child Benefit, which members opposite continue to vote against in budget after budget, puts up to $8,000 tax-free in the pockets of parents. This will help with the cost of baby formula. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Nobinière. Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government is the costliest in Canadian history. Every dollar the Prime Minister spends comes directly out of Canadians' pockets. The government allowed the National Research Council of Canada to spend over $60,000 of public money on patio furniture at a time when people are struggling to put food on the table. Mr. Speaker, everyone likes to soak up some sun, but the government should not be doing so at the expense of taxpayers. When will this Liberal government stop throwing money out the window and onto patios?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry.
Nous attendons de toutes les organisations gouvernementales.
We expect that all government organizations follow the required procurement process. Our government evaluates all organizations and assesses possible savings. Meanwhile, I know that the Research Council does a lot of important work for Canada and its growth. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, food prices have risen nearly 40% faster in Canada than in the United States, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, who the Liberals want to dismiss in the near future. Hidden taxes will drive up gas prices by up to 17 cents a litre. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals could have brought down food costs for Canadian households. Why is the Prime Minister sticking with a hidden tax of 17 cents a litre on fuel, which makes food even more expensive? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. Mr. Speaker, we are looking for solutions to bring down food prices. But you know, Mr. Speaker, real solutions are based on real facts. Last week at the agriculture community, we heard from the Costco CEO, and he told us that what drives up food prices is the impact of climate variations on harvests. When it's a good year or a good harvest, food prices will go down, but if it's a bad year, prices will go up.
For Newmarket, Aurora.
This
This Liberal government is the most expensive in Canadian history. A father in Newmarket who is an engineer said to me, we cannot cover the living costs. I can only pay for the mortgage, utilities, and taxes. Food, transportation, and insurance, well, that's out of pocket. And while Canadians struggle, the Liberals keep a punishing fuel tax that adds up to 17 cents more per litre at the pumps, hiking the cost of parents driving to work, of the farmers, and the truckers who bring the food to our shelves. So why is this Prime Minister clinging to this fuel tax and doubling down on reckless inflationary spending?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Family.
Mr. Speaker, instead of the members opposite focusing on fake taxes, rather they should support things that actually put a few bucks extra in the pockets of hardworking Canadians. You know, as a former single mother and a person who lived paycheck to paycheck for most of my life, I can tell you that what helps parents, what helps families, is having money in their pockets. And so when we index things like the Canada Child Benefit to inflation, that puts money in the pockets of Canadians. They can then use it to buy the things they need. It's pretty simple, Mr. Speaker, but it's really hard for these Conservatives to understand.
The Honourable Member for Newmarket Aurora.
Fake, Mr. Speaker. The Liberals say that the cost pressures on Canadians are fake. Here's another note from someone else in Newmarket. As the cost of living increases and our salaries don't, we are being driven into poverty. 4 out of 5 Canadians list food as their #1 worry when paying their bills. Food. And Statistics Canada confirms that beef is up 17%, baby formula 6%, coffee up 34%. That is not fake. They should knock on some doors and get a reality check from the people they claim to represent. The Liberals dismiss the struggles of Canadians, but I ask, why?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it really seems to me like the member opposite missed her chance to vote for a tax cut that would have benefited 22 million Canadians, including members in her riding. Now, just this morning, she spoke about engineers. Mr. Speaker, just this morning, I met with the International Union of Operating Engineers. There are 18,000 here in Ontario. You know what we talked about? We talked about the importance of early learning and childcare, because they need that not only to recruit and train new engineers, but to benefit the families who depend on it for affordable childcare so they can go to work.
Hear, hear. Honourable Member for Simcoe North.
It has been reported that the government is considering lifting the tanker ban to support an east-west oil pipeline. The problem is some Liberal MPs and even cabinet ministers don't support this proposal. So, Mr. Speaker, who speaks for the government? Will the minister finally clear it up today that the government is going to do what Conservatives have called for all along, scrap the emissions cap and lift the tanker ban so Canadian resources can get to market?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, we're going to do what we need to do, which is build Canada strong. The Prime Minister has been clear. Major projects will only proceed with rigorous environmental assessments and clear contributions to Canada's climate change objectives.
The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow is Economic Violence Awareness Day. The day is a Canadian initiative that is now observed around the world. Economic violence, such as restricting access to money, sabotaging employment, or forcing someone into debt, is a common form of gender-based violence. Economic violence robs people of their autonomy and limits their ability to lead a stable and fulfilling life. I am proud to have voted in favour of a budget with measures to combat economic violence. Could the Minister of Finance remind those who voted against the budget of what exactly they opposed? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for her excellent question and for her leadership on this file. Preventing economic violence means guaranteeing access to information and financial resources. Good news, and the Conservatives should be happy about this. In Budget 2025, we announced our intention to develop a voluntary code of conduct for the prevention of economic violence. In order to do so, we will collaborate with the Canadian financial sector, because the sector plays a role in early detection of violence. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, some members voted against the budget in this place, but we should all support the fight against economic violence.
Canadians need to know that every decision the Prime Minister makes is in the national interest and not in his own financial interest. Yesterday at committee, Brookfield confirmed that every time Brookfield makes money, this Prime Minister makes money, and that 1,900 companies that Brookfield owns are not covered by this Prime Minister's ethics screen.
Wow.
Every time he goes down to the White House, he doesn't come back with a deal for Canadians, but the last time he went, he did get a $80 billion deal for Brookfield. So will the Prime Minister just give Canadians the confidence they deserve and sell his financial interest in Brookfield?
The Honourable Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition should stop the conspiracy theories. They should get out more, stop saying no, and find out who's saying yes to Canada. They don't even have to go far. Just this morning, I was in Canada where Nokia said yes to Canada and the Ottawa-Gatineau area, and they broke ground in a $340 million innovation center. They employed 2,600 Canadians. They will employ 340 more. They should do what Nokia does. Build in Canada, buy in Canada, believe in Canada.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands.
It must be concerning for the minister that the clerk of the Privy Council believed in the same conspiracy so much that he sold his shares in Brookfield knowing that he couldn't manage the conflict of interest in the role that he had. The same conflict that this Prime Minister has. And he's supposed to be managing this Prime Minister's conflicts. Every time Brookfield makes money, this Prime Minister is making money. Even the Chief Operating Officer of Brookfield itself admits this very thing. With 1,900 companies that Brookfield owns not covered by this Prime Minister's ethics screen, why won't he just do the thing that Canadians need, give them the confidence that they deserve, and sell his shares in Brookfield?
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of deals, last week it was Germany investing $1 billion in Canadian defense technology. A few days ago, it was the Prime Minister of the United Arab Emirates securing $70 billion for our industries here. And just today in Ottawa, Finnish Nokia investing $340 billion, supporting thousands of jobs, exporting to over 115 countries, Mr. Speaker. The world is calling, and we are answering.
The Honourable Member for St. Albert, Sturgeon River.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's conflicts with Brookfield are everywhere. Yesterday, the COO of Brookfield said that when Brookfield does well, the Prime Minister does well. So is it any wonder that this government is helping Brookfield do well, including fast-tracking a Brookfield-owned LNG project and handing $500 million to a foreign space agency partnered with Brookfield? Why won't the Prime Minister end his conflicts and fully divest himself from Brookfield?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, conspiracy theories, imaginary taxes, all a different way to say no to Canada. This is a party that says yes. And guess what? Just today, Nokia said yes to Canada. They invested $340 million in an innovation center. Those are good jobs, Mr. Speaker. 2,600 jobs in Canada, 340 more good jobs. They broke ground today. Why, Mr. Speaker? They're building in Canada, buying in Canada, and believing in Canada, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg West.
Mr. Speaker, on November 12th, we saw the Build Canada Homes program accelerate affordable housing projects across the country, including a major announcement at Nawi-Odeno in Winnipeg. Approximately 320 new homes, 40% of them below market and developed in partnership with Treaty 1 First Nations, are now set to move forward. This is exactly the kind of progress my constituents in Winnipeg West are looking for. Could the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure update the House on how these Build Canada Homes projects in Winnipeg and other cities will help deliver affordable homes more quickly?
Absolutely fair. The Honourable Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member for Winnipeg West for his great question. Our government is making generational investments in building the homes that Canadians need right now. And this month, Build Canada Homes took a major step in the redevelopment of sites in accelerating affordable housing in Winnipeg, in Ottawa, and in Edmonton. This will add nearly 1,800 affordable homes across Canada, the housing that Canadians need. And will the Conservatives in the meantime support the first-time homebuyers tax? They're stalling it here, preventing first-time homebuyers from accessing $50,000 savings.
The honourable member for Montmorency, Charlevoix. When Brookfield makes money, the Prime Minister makes money. Those aren't our words. Those are the words of Brookfield's Chief Operating Officer. That's what he told us in committee yesterday. And if that wasn't bad enough, we found out that 95% of businesses owned by Brookfield are not even covered in the Prime Minister's ethics screen. And the people who are supposed to oversee the ethics screen don't even have access to the full list of businesses. Mr. Speaker, can someone explain to us why Brookfield's interests seem to perfectly align with the Liberal budget tabled last week? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, our friends across the way are continuing to enjoy being a bit conspiracist. Now, as the member likely knows full well, the Code of Ethics, which MPs and parliamentarians must abide by, is thorough, and the Prime Minister must follow that Code of Conduct and Ethics.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the government is letting Canadian Airlines violate the human rights of people with disabilities. This time, it's WestJet, who put in place arbitrary weight restrictions, preventing people with motor vehicles from flying. The result, denying people with disabilities the right to travel safely for work, education, or to visit loved ones. When will the Liberals close loopholes in the Accessible Canada Act, uphold disability rights, and hold corporate executives accountable when they violate these rights?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, of course, we have an ongoing dialogue with Canada's transportation companies about ensuring the mark of a great society is the space and the ability for all members of that society to participate in it. And we obviously want the transportation sector to be very reflective of that great generosity in Canada. We have a proud record on this side of the House and renewing and reaffirming our commitment to accessibility in Canada. We'll continue to do that, and we'll do that in partnership with the transportation sector.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, Danielle Smith is making an unprecedented attack on healthcare in this country. If she is allowed to get away with privatization, it will be the beginning of the end of public, universal, single-payer healthcare in this country. And it is central to Canadian identity. And Alberta healthcare workers are calling for the government to protect healthcare, to enforce the Canada Healthcare Act. Will the Prime Minister protect public healthcare and enforce the law in this country, or will he just take a photo op with Daniel?
L'Honorable Ministre de la Santé.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, our new government will always protect the Canada Health Act and Canada's universal healthcare system. That's why Budget 2025, our new government is investing in our publicly funded healthcare system, including through generational investments of $5 billion to build healthcare infrastructures. We have a collaborative approach with all provinces and territories to ensure all Canadians continue to have an equitable access to medically necessary care based on their medical needs, not their ability to pay. Thank you.
And that concludes question period for today. I know you're disappointed, but it'll be back tomorrow. Je désire informer.
I would like to inform the House that the volume of earpieces will now be reset.
Je vais attendre quelques.
Just going to wait a few seconds before reading a ruling on a point of privilege that was raised by the member for Edmonton West, I believe.
était houleux aujourd'hui. I am now prepared to rule on the question of privilege raised on November 17th, 2025 by the member for Edmonton West regarding information the Parliamentary Budget Officer requested from the government. I don't know if members are interested. The member alleged that a contempt of the House was committed when the government refused to provide in a timely manner information about measures in the 2025 budget, particularly the Comprehensive Expenditure Review. He stated that this refusal was contrary to subsection 79.41 of the Parliament of Canada Act and that it compromised the House's ability to hold an informed debate on the budget speech. The member pointed out that the Parliamentary Budget Officer had informed the House of this refusal by notifying the Speaker, as provided by Section 79.42 of the Act. In the member's view, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has a legislative mandate from Parliament to